Hello, it is me, Rising Feathers, and I am still here despite what it might have looked like. The TLDR is that a lot of life has happened in the past 4 months or so, but I'm back now, and I don't want to make this intro too long, but I want to give the quickest of recaps. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend using the link down below to do so. What this is a part 2 of a Soul Link Randomizer Nuzlocke I was doing with Captain Britain. I explained what all that means last time, but here are the rules on screen and they will be in the description as well. The previous video went over the first 3 attempts of this challenge where we never got further than Morty, the 4th badge. Those good at math might have noticed that that's only half the badges needed for the Elite Four. We definitely asked ourselves more than once, at what point do we say, well, we gave it our best shot, but maybe this just isn't in the stars. After all, we both have lives and, to be honest, quite conflicting schedules. But 3 attempts still didn't feel like we had given it our all, so we decided to keep trying. Like last time, I'm going to stick to only captures and major battles unless we get new ground to cover, so post-Morty. We're still using the same rules as in attempts 2 and 3. 4th time at the lab, and wouldn't you look at that, it's Johto's biggest menace, Why Not? Once again here to mock me and reinforce our decision to use a Wobbuffet clause. Being smarter this time, I chose the Pokemon that wasn't Why Not, nor would give my rival Why Not, which was an Infernape, probably the best out of the bunch anyway. Indeed, my rival Swablu basically fainted just looking at us. Seems good. Though what isn't good is the fact that my first possible capture, on Route 29, failed because this Bayleaf wouldn't stay in a Pokeball and then fainted from a burn. This is a good time to mention that after this I won't really be commenting on any lost encounters. If there's a route or a location I didn't mention a catch from, just assume something went wrong for one of us and it wasn't meant to be. However, things go better after this because on Route 30 I catch a Cherim and a Cascoon on Route 31. But the first death of the run comes early when Bud the Cherim gets rocked by a trainer's Weasel using Sonic Boom. Sonic Boom doesn't have the longevity of something like Dragon Rage, but this early on it can still be a death sentence. In memory of Bud, I christened our next capture, a Spearow in Dark Cave, as Bud Light. The next capture I got excited about was a Seadra found in Sprout Tower. They're not the best water type ever, but I think they're cool. I pick up the first Primo egg and run back to Cherry Grove to hatch it. Remember, all 3 Primo eggs are valid despite coming from the same source, as long as they're hatched somewhere where I don't already have an encounter. This one hatches into a Venonat. Potentially having a Dustosk and a Venomoth in the same party isn't the best, but assuming one or either will even get that far is a bold assumption to make. I find a Bulbasaur on Route 32, and unlike our previous attempt at catching a grass starter, this one actually gets to join the party. Shortly after Sprout Tower, Vodka evolves into a Dustox, the first evolution of the run. But as cool as that is, Vodka isn't coming with us to the gym. Instead, I'm bringing Martini the Infernape and Midori the Bulbasaur. Unlike previous attempts, I make sure all participating Pokemon are at the level cap to give them the best chance of success. But will it be enough? Let's find out. Over the course of this challenge, we've seen Faulkner have quite the assortment of Pokemon, but I feel a bit more at ease when I see that his first one is a Hoppip. A bit too at ease as I first attempt to use Leech Seed, which does not affect him. Oh, when will I learn? Hoppip responds with a Tail Whip and I retaliate with a Poison Powder before switching to Martini. Hoppip uses Synthesis to heal its poison damage before I simply one-shot him with an Ember. For his final Pokemon, Faulkner sends out a Politoed, definitely more of a threat. To have the typing advantage, I immediately switch back to Midori, who takes a Bubble Beam. I then use Leech Seed, but not before the faster Politoed uses Perish Song. What I should have done here is kept Midori in another turn or 2 to see if maybe I could have knocked him out with Vine Whip, or at least gotten Faulkner to use a potion before switching. Instead, I switch right away back to Martini, who in turn immediately gets knocked out with the crit Bubble Beam. I don't know if the crit mattered. Probably not, but this is definitely depressing. With Midori being my only hope, I go straight for those Vine Whips. They don't do great damage, but neither does Bubble Beam, so at this point all I need to do is survive. Politoed uses Perish Song again, but it doesn't matter because as he falls into the red, he is taken out by his own original Perish Song. Using it again doesn't reset the counter. So once again, that's the Zephyr Badge in hand, but at the cost of my starter. Or, I should say, our starters. Sorry, Cap. But it's a tough world out there. Indeed, Martini's spot doesn't even have time to get cold before a Donphan hatches from this attempt's egg for Mr. Pokemon. I just like how he's described as impetuous and silly. What's also silly is that Bud Light got so close to taking out this Drapion, only to be knocked out from a crit bite. I mean, he did lower my defense a bit, but I thought I had it. I mean, I almost did, but yeah. Got greedy. But like 5 seconds ago, seats don't stay empty for long, and a Murkrow joins us from Union Cave. Before the bad luck finally comes for Cap and he loses his vodka. To be replaced by a Pupitar from round 33. Man, this back and forth has been, it's been something. And finally in the Slowpoke well, I find a Poliwag. It must be that Politoed back from beyond. Well, if she proves herself useful, maybe she can make some better decisions this go around. For Bugsy, I this time bring Bourbon the Donphan, Cosmo the Murkrow, and once again, Midori, now an Ivysaur. First up is Midori versus Ambipom. Ambipom is faster and starts with a Sand attack followed up with an Astonish. Thankfully, Leech Seed doesn't miss, and I then attempt a Vine Whip, but that misses, and now my attack and defense are both lower from a Tickle. Having enough of this, I switch to Bourbon. Ambipom still uses Astonish, but the Leech Seed heals all, if not most of that damage, so it's a non-issue. An extra sensory from Bourbon is enough to proc Ambipom's Citrus Berry, and a follow-up Horn attack along with more Leech Seed damage is enough to finish it off. Bugsy's second Pokemon is a Forretress, and now I'm spooked. Forretress can use self-destruct, and knowing my luck, she for sure knows it. I'm not sure any of my Pokemon would survive that scenario, but I've got no choice but to try. Horn attack proves to be ineffective while Forretress uses a better damaging Bug Bite. I switch to Cosmo and get in a low damaging Wind attack, but not before I receive 2 Bug Bites, which bring me down to only 15 HP. She won't survive another, so I switch to Midori. A few turns later, I'm at half health from 2 more Bug Bites, but now the Forretress has been Leech Seeded. I switch yet again and bring back out Bourbon, who gets brought down to just above half by, you guessed it, another Bug Bite. I lock myself into Rollout with Bourbon, and Forretress finally drops into the yellow. She tries to retaliate with a takedown, but thankfully misses, and upon a hit from Rollout, Bugsy uses a Super Potion to bring her back to full. But thanks to heals from Leech Seed, I am also almost back to full. But that isn't enough to save me from what happens next. 2 more hits from Rollout leaves Forretress on what must be 1 HP, and you know what that means. Kaboom! Both Pokemon faint, and the final matchup is Midori versus Arbok. Midori's health is now looking great, so we use our signature opening of Leech Seed. It takes Arbok 3 attempts of Glare for her to not miss and finally leave us paralyzed. But we're able to fight through it, and thanks to Leech Seed damage as well as its heals, we're able to stay up long enough to finally take down Arbok and defeat Bugsy. Losing Bourbon sucks, but I'm grateful it wasn't worse. Despite the rest of my team not being very leveled, I decided that since the rival only has 3 Pokemon, one of them being a non-threatening Swablu, that challenging him should be no problem. Except it was a very big problem. I mean, it started well. Midori got a crit Vine Whip against his first Pokemon, Whismur, taking it out. But then his Gyarados comes out, and that's when things take a turn for the worse. My Vine Whip does almost nothing, while his Thrash does almost half. I switch to Cosmo, but another Thrash takes her below half. At least Gyarados is now confused. I bring in Jaeger Bomb, who only loses a third from Thrash, and starts using Smokescreen to hopefully stop this mayhem. I get in 2 before another Thrash leaves me with 14 HP. I swap back to Midori, hoping that, since Gyarados is no longer confused, that the accuracy drop could give me time to use Leech Seed. But no such luck, and after yet another Thrash, Midori's in the red on only 10 HP. Hoping against hope, I try again, but he misses, as Gyarados finally misses a Thrash too. Such awful luck. Gyarados is now confused again, so I risk it for the biscuit and try for that Leech Seed. And get it. But Gyarados also gets it and takes out Midori with what must be his 400th Thrash. As you can see here, the fact that I chose not to level the rest of my party for this fight was a big mistake. Grasping for options, I bring in Cosmo, and thankfully Gyarados misses his next Thrash. Despite its low damage output, I keep using Astonish. I figure that its chance to flinch, plus the accuracy drops, plus the chance for confusion, this is probably the best plan I have for longevity. A couple of turns into this, and Thrash hits, but Cosmo has healed enough from Midori's parting Leech Seed to survive it. With Gyarados having been chipped down to what must again be 1 HP, one final Astonish finally knocks it out. But it's not over yet, for he still has that Swablu, you know, the one I've basically dismissed thus far. He's level 18, and I don't really have anything that jumps out at me as helpful, so I send out On the Rocks for her debut to see how much she can do. Swablu puts up a safeguard, and I'm only able to get in a weak bubble before being put to sleep. She stays asleep as Swablu starts getting revenge with his own Astonish, and once at only 9 HP, I switch to Rum. But her confusion doesn't fare much better, so I disable Swablu's Astonish. That might have been a bad idea though, as after he puts me to sleep, he uses his previously unknown 4th move, Fury Attack. A 3-hitter leaves me at 11 HP, and I'm still asleep. Despite being her debut, I bring back On the Rocks to use as a free switch. She manages to get in one more bubble, but then the end comes swift. Cosmo takes the mantle and uses wind attack to bring Swablu into the low yellow. Swablu goes for Fury attack again, and as long as he doesn't hit 5 times... Fuck. Well, that sucks. Jagerbomb jumps in with a water gun to finally bring us victory, but damn was that brutal. There was some bad luck in there, but I've once again paid for my decision to underestimate my opponents. So yeah, once again we have some vacancies on the team, so let's see what we can do before Goldenrod. I get my second Primo Egg and hatch it in Azalea Town into an Onyx. Then in the Elix Forest I get an Exeggutor, and finally on Route 34 I get a Sharpedo. It's definitely not a team comp I've ever used before, but there are at least some good options for Whitney here. In fact, let's just jump right into that. Bringing Margarita the Sharpedo and Decanter the Onyx as my team, I'm going in pretty nervous. Sure, only having 2 Pokemon means she only has 2 as well, but even if one of those is super scary, I really don't have many options. Speaking of, her first Pokemon is a Wailord. Decanter is in huge danger out here, but fortunately Margarita is able to switch in, taking only a little damage from Water Gun. Bite is my best move here, and while I don't get any flinches, I only take damage from a first turn rollout before taking out Wailord on the 3rd bite. Her second and last Pokemon is an Ambipom, and I open with another bite, this time getting the flinch while also taking about a third of her health. The Ambipom is faster and starts using high damaging Fury Swipes. The good news is that it only hit twice and that she receives my rough skin damage on both assaults, but the bad news is that I'm only left on 8 HP. I decide to risk another bite, but it leaves her on a sliver and there's no flinch. Knowing she's going to use this turn to heal, I swap into Decanter, who is of course outsped and takes a tickle. A rock throw from Decanter doesn't do much damage, so I switch to Headbutts while Ambipom starts using Astonish. I would have won this battle of attrition, but Whitney of course has her second Super Potion, and that brings the end of attempt 4. We once again wondered if we should throw in the towel, but we had 6 seeds initially made ahead of time, so what's 1 or 2 more tries, right? Right? Let's just see how attempt 5 goes. Back to the lab again, and this time the choices are Corsola, Spheal, and Seal. Alright. I pick Spheal, and as per usual, nothing happens after that until... Oh hey, the rival! He has Seal, and after the first turn, I find that we do about the same amount of damage to each other, which gets me nervous, so I start defense curling. Seal opts to use Growl, but that doesn't matter because my attack of choice here is Water Gun. I know for a lot of people, Nuzlocke don't start until after you get your first Pokeballs, but I've always been on the fence about this rule. Like, why shouldn't this count? Especially when I'm able to grind to a level higher than his Pokemon. But after curling as hard as he can, Hyacinth starts laying in with the water guns until the battle is won. With said controversial Pokeballs in hand, I head out into the world and catch the usual slew of Pokemon leading up to Violet City. There's a Houndour from Route 29, a Probopass from Route 30, a Weezing from Dark Cave, a Bronzong from my first Primo Egg, a Swablu from Sprout Tower, a Trico from Route 32, and a Hippopotas from the Ruins of Alph. Unfortunately, the encounter on Route 31 was unsuccessful, but I mean, I feel like we got some pretty good Pokemon during that, and in order to try to keep them around for as long as possible, I'm doing what I should have been doing since the beginning, and leveling everyone who's fighting to the level cap. I know that's like a wicked obvious thing, but it's about growth, you know? With this groundbreaking strat in mind, it's Hyacinth the Spheal and Daisy the Bronzong versus Falkner. I lead Daisy into his Metatide, and it's just embarrassing. We both use Confusion, and while mine is almost a one-shot, his did a single point of damage. Oh, buddy. After a second Confusion, Falkner's final Pokemon is Weezing. I put it to sleep in attempts to avoid a potential self-destruct, and then use Confusion to take it into the yellow. Weezing wakes up right away, but it only uses a tackle, giving me the win with the second Confusion. Well, that was easy. But you can never be too careful, so let's see who else we can recruit. I get a Hitmontop from Professor Elm's Egg, a female Nidoran from Union Cave, a Claydol from Route 33, a Teddiursa from the Slowpoke Well, and speaking of the Slowpoke Well, Lotus the Trico evolves into Grovyle. This works out because he, Daisy, and Orchid the Houndour are who I'm breeding to face Bugsy. Houndour is clearly, no pun intended, the underdog here, but having a fire type could prove to be advantageous. Let's find out. Bugsy starts off with his ace, a Slowking, and I immediately put it to sleep with Hypnosis from Daisy. Despite being part psychic, I test out a Confusion to find that it unsurprisingly does barely any damage. Same with Tackle. You could argue that I should switch, but Daisy is bulky, so unless they're at a type disadvantage, I don't see a problem with playing the long game. I keep tackling, put Soul King back to sleep when she wakes up, and eventually proc her Citrus Berry. However, by the third Hypnosis, I do start to lose patience, so I end up switching to Lotus and use Absorb for as you can imagine, better damage. However, Slowking starts using Confusion, which takes away about a third of Lotus's health, and Absorb is really only delaying the inevitable. Bugsy uses a Super Potion, and I see if Pursuit will do more damage, but it's about the same, and now I'm in the yellow. Thinking that maybe I was right the first time, I bring back Daisy and go back to Hypnosis and Tackle. I get Slowking back into the red, but then she wakes up and hits me with a crit water gun that almost brings me into the red. Well, that took a turn. I knock her out with another Tackle, but that's 2 out of my 3 Pokemon at low health, while Bugsy still has 2 untouched. Speaking of, next is Wheezing. Something about gym leaders and Weezings this time around, I guess. Well, if Weezy is going to potentially self-destruct, she is not going to be taking Daisy with her, so I switch to Orchid and start using Bite for about a quarter of her health. Wheezing, of course, starts with a crit Tackle, which doesn't bode well, but I do get in a double flinch that allows Orchid to finish Wheezing. Super lucky. His last Pokemon is a Breloom, great for my fire type, so I risk it to see if I can get an Emperor in there, but she outspeeds and Orchid goes down. I bring Daisy back out to use Confusion, and despite it being super effective, it's not enough and she survives in the red. I hope that Daisy's bulk gets us through whatever happens next, which happens to be a crit Tackle, and she survives on 6 HP. Relief surges through me as the second Confusion clutches the victory. I'm glad I won, but it's sad to see Houndour gone so soon, especially after that win against Wheezing. You did good, friend. Before leaving Azalea Town, I hatch my second Primo Egg, which is a Yanmega. Time for a rival fight. His first Pokemon is Shroomish, who goes up against Daisy. Shroomish manages to paralyze me, but that doesn't stop Daisy from taking him down with Confusions. His next Pokemon is Trapinch, but Lotus takes him out with 2 Absorbs. His last Pokemon is of course Seal, and I send out Tulip the Probopass. I get encored into using Tackle, and while it's not doing much damage, it's still better than Seal's Ice Charge, which do only 1 damage. It's a long battle, but Tulip, like Daisy, is a bulky, fully evolved Pokemon. It's really not even fair, to be honest. On the way to Goldenrod City, I catch a Lanoon in the Elix Forest, and a Pikachu from Route 34. Once in Goldenrod, I hatch my final Primo Egg into Torterra. He, along with Pikachu, are going to be left at the daycare for now. And just like that, we're back at the fight that ended the previous attempt. But with Daisy and Lotus working together, I feel we've probably got this. Her Swalot opens with a yawn at Daisy, but Daisy reciprocates with their own Hypnosis. I swap to Lotus and back to Daisy to negate the effects of yawn, but by then Swalot is awake and gets off 2 Amnesias before I'm able to use a now underwhelming extrasensory. Swalot uses yawn once more, and I manage to use Confuse Ray and 1 more extrasensory before falling asleep. I opt to keep Daisy in, and due to Swalot hitting herself twice in Confusion, I wake up with no damage taken. Another extrasensory causes Whitney to use a Super Potion, but I keep at it, and after more damageless turns of sleep due to Swalot trying to use Yawn and Sludge, I'm able to eventually knock her out. Her final Pokemon is a Phanpy, and I swap to Lotus, who loses almost half health from a takedown, but Absorb crits, leaving her in the red and Lotus back at full health. Whitney uses her second Super Potion and a pretty hard-hitting Natural Gift, but neither are enough, and Lotus is able to take out Phanpy with a few more Absorbs, winning us the 3rd badge. It's been a long time since we made it this far, but we still have a long way to go. That way, which first takes us north to Route 35. Now, upon entering the route is one of those guard stations, where the guard inside requests for you to take a message held by a Spearow to a friend on Route 31. So here's the thing, you can indeed do that, or you can just keep this now randomized Spearow as your Route 35 encounter at no risk or consequence to you, other than, possibly guilt. But the guy never says how soon he needs his message delivered, so it's really fine, I think. Yeah, probably fine. So we keep Kenya here, and mine is a Tailo, which is indeed better than a Spearow, so I call that a win. Especially that since she came to me at level 20, she only needed to grow 2 levels before evolving into Swallow. But going back to more traditional methods, I catch a Quillfish as the Pseudo Widow encounter on Route 36, though not before I had to sacrifice Lily the Lanoon on a 5th turn rollout. I don't remember what Cap got for this, but I hope it was better than a Quillfish because between him and Lily, I'd have rather kept Lily. In better news, I also catch a Drifloon from Route 37, a Dusknoir from the National Park, and a Togekiss on Route 38. Once in Ecruteak City, there is of course Morty, but also the rival fight in the Burn Tower, so let's just get that over with first. He opens with Bonsly and I with Daisy. Upon confusing each other, I switch to Lotus and knock him out with 2 Absorbs. Next is his trusty Seal, to which I bring back in Daisy and just spam extrasensory until he faints. Partially because it's effective, but also because he encores me into it, so I don't really have much of a choice. His last two Pokemon are Riolu and Vigoroth, but once again, a couple extra sensories to the face get the job done just fine. I've never used a Bronzong before this, but yeah, seems pretty good. Which is why Daisy will join Lotus, Kenya, and Dandelion the Dusknoir in the fight against Morty. I'm especially nervous for this fight because we haven't gotten this far since way back in Attempt 1. If we can both win this, then we can finally cross into some new territory. But this team is pretty stacked, so at least on my end, I think we've got a pretty good chance. His first Pokemon is a Bidoof, and while Extra Sensory is just barely not enough to one-shot, I'm fine with that because that means he uses one of his Hyper Potions here. Once Bidoof is taken care of, he then sends out his Pinsir. I switch to Kenya and start using Wind Attack for decent damage. However, after proccing his Citrus Berry, he uses a Brick Break to deal more than half of my HP in damage. I then switch to Dandelion, who cannot be damaged by Brick Break, which causes Morty to switch to his Snorunt. Snorunt tries using Bite, but despite being weak to it, Dandelion is just too much for Snorunt to handle and goes down after a couple of Nightshades and a Shadow Sneak. Next up is Magnemite, and despite paralyzing us, it's not enough to save him from Dandelion's Rampage. Last of course is already damaged Pinsir, and rather than lose gracefully, Morty drags it out for as long as possible by using several Hardens and another Hyper Potion. But in the end, it doesn't even matter, and we win our 4th badge. As does Cap, meaning we're finally making some real progress here. Which means there are a few things new to consider. For one, the level cap gets a bit funny in this part of the game. The cap for Morty was 25, but for the next 3 gyms, we only have 10 levels to play with. Overleveling is a real concern here, so I'll need to spread out my experience and potentially make some tough decisions as to who will be in what gym battles. In the meantime, we continue to catch as many Pokemon as possible. From surfing in that small patch of water in Ecruteak City, I find a Snubbull, then a Azurill from Route 32, a Minun from Mount Mortar, a Kricketune from Route 39, and a Mantike from Route 40. Though as I was walking to Olivine City, I got scared because the rival just busts out of the gym and starts talking to me, and I'm like, uh-oh, are we about to battle? Because I'm not prepared for that. But nope, he just declares that Jasmine is wasting her time with a sick Pokemon in the lighthouse and should just let him die. Awesome. We go up the lighthouse and talk to Jasmine for ourselves, agreeing to go get sick Amphi some medicine from Cyanwood City. Since she won't return to her gym until that's taken care of, and Cyanwood is also the best place for us to get our next badge, seems like a good next stop. On the way, I catch a love disc from Route 41. Once in Cyanwood, it becomes apparent that our rival has passed through here as well, for there's this terrified guy who had a Pokemon stolen by him. Or I guess he was scared into giving it to him. Considering there's no way to get him back, that sucks pretty hard, but the good news for us is that he offers us his other remaining Pokemon to look after in case our rival comes back. Now, considering the nickname of this Pokemon is Shucky, I can guess what it normally would have been, but today it is a Slacking. As if this team wasn't thick enough. And look, Suicune is here too. This place sure is popular. After some training, it's time for Chuck. He's only got 2 Pokemon, so we're sending in 2 veterans, Daisy and Lotus. His first Pokemon is a Forretress, and similar to the last Forretress we fought, I'm nervous that it'll self-destruct, so I put it to sleep. Use a couple Iron Defenses just in case, and then start chipping away with Extra Sensory. Even with the Hyper Potion, all Forretress is able to do is use Spikes and a laughable Rapid Spin before going down. Chuck's final Pokemon is an Armaldo, and I've gotta ask, is it common for people to think the red parts are the eyes? I've always seen it as intended and think he looks ridiculous, but based on what I'm reading here, it seems some folks mistake them for ears. Well, let me know how you see them. Oh, yeah, the fight. I mean, you know how fights with Daisy go by now. Lotus didn't even have to get up. 5th badge acquired. Before leaving, we do grab the medicine, but we don't exactly go back to Olivine City. At least not yet. Jasmine's Ace is at level 35, while Price's is at level 34. And in a world where the level cap is this crunched, you gotta do what you gotta do. Sorry, Amphi. But before hitting Mahogany Town, I do a few errands first. I check in on my Pokemon at the daycare. They're doing lovely, by the way. Ask her for more apricorns. Apricorns? Step a toe into Route 27 and catch a Luminion, and run into Suicune again by Mount Mortar. Now that I'm in Mahogany Town, I can't help but think that this isn't what I thought it would be. Everything from the shops to the locals are sketchy at best and downright criminal at worst. North is the Lake of Rage, and it seems that's where this nonsense connects to whatever's going on around here. So we head that way, but as if this place couldn't get any worse, Kappa falls tragedy and loses his Sequoia, which for me is my Togekiss. Now I haven't gotten a chance to talk about her because she was fairly new to the party, but she was doing very well and losing her hurts a lot. Her shoes will be filled by Marigold the Jolteon I just caught on Route 43. Further ahead we run into members of Team Rocket. It seems they no longer care of being noticed. And then finally we're at the lake itself, and I use repels up until the not Gyarados in the middle of the lake. Gotta get that free shiny after all. And it's a Volbeat. Okay, well it's a cool shiny, I just wish it was a cooler Pokemon. Returning to shore, I run into Kanto's Dragon Master Lance, who's been performing his own investigation. It seems that a mysterious radio signal from back in town has been forcing the local Magikarp to evolve, and we are to help him set things right. Well, Lance, I may not yet be a world-renowned trainer, but I can tell you that maybe, just maybe, the signal is coming from this definitely not tree in front of this definitely not souvenir store. Indeed, once downstairs, we find that Team Rocket has a whole HQ down here. As you can imagine, most of the grunts are pretty trivial, but that doesn't mean this place was completely uneventful. I caught his shells, which is cool. Then I ran into my rival, who just bitched about, even though he just lost to Lance, that he still can't get behind any philosophy other than his own. Solid. Hyacinth finally evolved after the fight with Executive Petrol, and then there's the double battle with Lance against Executive Ariana. Now normally this fight is whatever, but Lance has a Magnezone, and at first it's doing really well for us. But then it starts using Discharge, which ends up paralyzing and almost knocking out Dandelion. I then switch to Lotus, where another Discharge takes away half my health, but also knocks out Ariana's final Pokemon. I'm glad that Magnezone didn't use Discharge from the start, or it could have taken some of my Pokemon out no problem. I know Lance thinks he's hot shit, and that might be partially because he is, but that doesn't mean he gets to just take out ally Pokemon all willy-nilly like that. But regardless, our efforts are enough to stop the radio signal and calm down the Magikarp at the Lake of Rage. With that out of the way, it's time to face Price. Daisy and Lotus are basically gym staples at this point, but for my third Pokemon, it was a toss-up between Dandelion and Kenya, ultimately choosing Dandelion. Hopefully it was the right call. Masquerain proves to be no problem with Daisy's usual strategy of hypnosis and extrasensory. I think I'm just going to start calling this the Daisy Deluxe. But next is Dragonair, who takes away 40 HP with the Dragon Rage. Knowing I can survive one more, I say in to get off a Confused right before swapping to Dandelion and hope that Dragonair stays confused. But he doesn't and hits us with Dragon Rage. But he is confused on the next turn, which means I can land a Nightshade, which takes away slightly over half, proccing a Citrus Berry. Assuming Dragonair is just going to keep using Dragon Rage, I can get away with getting hit one more time, so I stay in hoping I get the Confusion look and can hit more Nightshades. But he hits me again and I only have 7 HP left. Now this is where things start to fall apart, if you didn't think they were already. Do I swap and risk having no healthy party members for his last Pokemon, or do I stay in and either get the Confusion luck or lose Dandelion and get the free switch? I choose to stay, but Dragonair snaps out of Confusion and takes out Dandelion. Lotus comes out and I use Leaf Blade, which doesn't knock him out. I get hit with a Dragon Rage, Price uses a Hyper Potion, and I am in big trouble. I chip a Quick Attack and use Leaf Blade again, but rather than using Dragon Rage, Dragonair thankfully goes for an Agility. I'm left with 8 HP after another Dragon Rage before I'm able to finally take him down with another Leaf Blade and Quick Attack. That's great, but my 2 remaining Pokemon are in horrible shape. I need to cross my fingers that whatever he's got left is super weak or super ineffective. It ends up being an Apom and there's nothing I can do but go for it and hope for the best. And the Mad Lad crits. I don't know if that mattered, but if it did, and hadn't, that probably would have been the end of my team. Lotus is an absolute legend. With only one level separating Price's level cap from Jasmine's, we basically have no choice but to finally go back to Olivine City and deliver them medicine. Once Amphia's feeling on the up and up, we give Jasmine no time to breathe as we immediately bust into her gym and challenge her. Newcomer Tumbleweed, the Ursaring, is going to take the spot next to Daisy and Lotus this time. I try a Daisy Deluxe against her Porygon, but missing the Hypnosis and then getting confused made it a sloppy fight that I still won using Extrasensory, but at the cost of only having a quarter of my health left thanks to getting hit by several Signal Beams. Her next Pokemon is Mantine, and I switch to Tumbleweed. A slash to Mantine procs her Citrus Berry, and after getting hit by 2 Water Pulses, I'm not looking so good. I bring in Lotus, which you could argue is what I should have done from the start, but I immediately get confused by the next Water Pulse. A Leaf Blade leaves her in the low red, so Jasmine uses a Hyper Potion, but the next Leaf Blade crits, taking her out. Her last Pokemon is a Pidgeotto, and that's a problem. Lotus is my healthiest Pokemon, but he's still confused, plus at a type disadvantage. I risk 1 Leaf Blade, which does about half, but then Pidgeotto takes Lotus's attack power with a Feather Dance. Not quite ready to give up, I snap out of confusion and use another Leaf Blade, leaving Pidgeotto in the low yellow. Thinking I have it, I give it one more go, but it leaves him on a sliver and Pidgeotto drags out Tumbleweed with the Whirlwind. Jasmine uses a hyper potion, but it doesn't matter because a single slash from Tumbleweed knocks it out. These past couple of gym battles have been a bit of a struggle, but I'm just glad we didn't lose anybody this time. But the celebration doesn't last long because we get a call from Professor Elm telling us that there have been radio broadcasts talking about Team Rocket. While he's skeptical about their return, we know better, so we head back to Goldenrod to investigate said radio tower. And yes indeed, it seems that Team Rocket has taken over, so we proceed to solve this problem in the way we always do, which is just beating the shit out of everybody. Or we would, but it seems that this rocket grunt here has done the unthinkable, which is just to simply say no, go away. Well, that sucks. Okay, time to get creative. Or at least take advantage of a less intelligent grunt in the Goldenrod Underground who just seems to be giving away uniforms to whoever might want one. This is enough to get us past that first grunt, so let's go back to Plan A and beat the shit out of everybody. While this was going on, Lotus evolved into Sceptile, and Tumbleweed died. Yeah, Executive Proton had a Medicham, and it one-shot her with a high jump kick. Cool. In efforts to find a replacement, we travel in and around the Safari Zone, trying to find something good, but they were either unable to be caught, or bad for one or both of us. I think one of them was a Ledians, so welcome back to the Team Bluebonnet. For about 5 minutes, because after the radio tower I find a Flygon on Route 44, which is a bit of an upgrade I think. Moving along through the ice path, I find and catch a Glaceon, which is not only thematic for this location, but my favorite evolution as well as one of my favorite Pokemon in general. It's not worth replacing my Celio for, but it did genuinely make me happy to have this Pokemon. On the other side is Blackthorn City, and while cities don't always have a possible encounter, here there happens to be some water behind Claire's gym. I opt to surf rather than fish and catch an Ivysaur. Must be a good swimmer. Speaking of Claire's gym, does anybody else look at the inside of this place and think that it must have belonged to Bowser at some point? I mean, Claire isn't exactly the most personable person ever. I wouldn't put it past her to have just taken it from him. But regardless, that doesn't change the fact we still have to battle her, so with Lotus, Daisy, Kenya, and newcomer Holly the Flygon, we challenge her for the 8th and final badge. I initially have Daisy out front, but upon seeing her Amistar, I swap into Lotus and get the one-shot with a crit Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade is expected to crit more often, but the amount of times it's come through have made it basically one of the most valuable moves on this team. Claire's next Pokemon is Seviper, so I switch back to Daisy, who unfortunately gets paralyzed right away from a glare. But Daisy fights through it to get the extra sensory one-shot. Half her team is down and we're still looking good, but then her next Pokemon and her ace is a Shuckle of all things. Gyro Ball from Daisy is super effective, but because of Shuckle's gimmicky strong defense, it still doesn't do much damage. The next Gyro Ball activates her Oran Berry, and I experiment to see if Extra Sensory does more damage, with the results being no, not really. If that wasn't annoying enough, Shuckle then uses Rest. Yeah, it apparently does that. I swap to Holly to get in some sand attacks, but Shuckle wakes up and not only suppresses my Levitate ability with Gastro Acid, but because I didn't know better, I lose my Pecha Berry thanks to Bug Bite. I use Dragon Breath, which does even worse damage, but actually ends up paralyzing her. So between that and the sand attacks, I hope to KO this thing, but once in the red, Claire uses a Hyper Potion, and then once on low health again, she gets off the rest, removing the paralysis. I try to knock her out before she wakes up, but Dragon Breath isn't strong enough and she uses Rest again before I can pull it off. Since I don't know what Claire's final Pokemon is, I don't want to run out of PP on my only Dragon move, so I switch to Feint Attack. But this gets me nowhere as she rests 3 more times. By this point, Holly's PP is looking rough, and she's also barely above half health from the occasional bug bites we've been taking. I bring Daisy back in despite still being paralyzed, and after a couple of turns, I'm able to use Confuse Ray on the off chance this could stop this endless cycle of rests. Off chance being the key phrase here because despite actually taking a little damage from being confused, they're never during attempts at rest, so 3 more rests later, not much has changed. That third rest was particularly frustrating because she was in the low red for the first time in forever. But we do return to the low red shortly after, and she uses for the first time Wrap, the mystery final move in her moveset. Those at home can add up how many rests that was, but I think we actually stalled Shuckle out of rest PP. Fun fact, this whole little back and forth with how it Shuckle took 16 minutes and 45 seconds. I think for me that's a personal record for longest fight against a single Pokemon I've ever had in my entire life. I would really appreciate it if there were no more Shuckles during the course of the Soul Link, please and thank you. Claire has 1 more Pokemon, but it's only an Apom. I mean, after Shuckle it would have to be something crazy to really top that, you know? I swap to Kenya, who almost one-shots with Fly. Seeing that, I use Quick Attack after Claire uses her Hyper Potion, and then use Fly once more to end this circus of a gym battle once and for all. But if you being Claire before you know that it's not over yet, rather than admit defeat, she sends you on a quest to the Dragon's Den to further prove your worth, which apparently entails answering some very obvious morality questions presented by an old guy. Well, I say very obvious, but I guess it isn't to Claire, who outs herself by saying she still hasn't passed after storming into the place assuming we've failed. It isn't until the old guy threatens to tell her cousin Lance, yeah, that Lance, that she's acting like a whiny bitch, that she finally gives us her gym badge. Against all odds, that's 8 badges, but before heading to the Elite Four, there's a bit of encounter cleanup to take care of. I used repels during my time in the Dragon's Den to prevent my encounter, and continue to do so as I head back in and talk to Old Guy once more. He normally gives you a Dratini with extreme speed, but this time it's a Mr. Mime with extreme speed. Not useful, but still kind of funny. After talking with Professor Elm, I take on the Kimono Girls back in Necrotique City. I breeze through them almost without hassle except for this battle with a Metachamp that almost took out Daisy and Kenya. Finding the Kimono Girls isn't essential to be in the game, so I'd normally skip a potentially risky event like this, but upon victory they give you, in Soul Silver, a title bell. Now I've never made it a rule that ban legendaries, but at the same time I've yet to use one in Nuzlocke. However, with this title bell, and the Master Bell I got earlier, I mentioned to satisfy the curiosity of what legendaries waiting for me in the Whirl Islands. Yes, in this randomizer, Lugia and Ho-Oh have been randomized to another random legendary Pokemon. In Soul Silver, Lugia is level 45 and Ho-Oh is at level 70, swapped in Heart Gold. Unless I want to use it for Red, a level 70 encounter is unusable, so Cap and I decide to go get our level 45 legendary for the shits and giggles. Place your bets on who it is. Wow. I mean, I'm a big fan of Lugia, don't get me wrong, but yeah, Rayquaza is pretty damn good, isn't it? Now, will I use it? I mean, I prefer not to, but I have it. Continuing with the last of the Johto encounters, I catch a Sudowoodo on Route 45, a Totodile on Route 46, who I level up to take Celio's place in the party, a Seadra at Tojo Falls, a Metacham on Route 26, and finally a Pinsir from Victory Road. Victory Road in Johto is much shorter than the one in Kanto, but that doesn't stop it from coming in clutch for being the location of TM26 Earthquake. Speaking of TMs, it's important to note that before coming here, I also picked up the TM from Thunderbolt at the Goldenrod Game Corner. I am extremely bad at Voltorb Flip, by the way. What happens now is the final, sort of, fight with our rival. Even at this point, he's still spouting his usual angst about strength and weakness, but it's hard to take him seriously when he has a level 36 Venonat. Elm the Feraligatr makes his strength known by taking out said Venonat in 2 slashes, and is Cherubi with a single Ice Fang. Once Kabutops comes out, I switch to Lotus to one-shot with Leaf Blade. I use Daisy for Jinx, and after stupidly using an extra sensory, I knock her out with a Gyro Ball. Finally getting serious, he sends out a Dragonite as his 5th Pokemon. Normally that would be a bit scary, but a Daisy Deluxe is enough to get the job done. And of course, Dewgong is his final Pokemon, as well as the one that puts up the most fight. He starts using Brine, remember that attack for later on, causing me to switch to Elm. But paralysis from earlier in the fight makes me slow, so I'm only able to get in a single crunch before having to bring him back and use a Leaf Blade from Lotus for the victory. Somehow this loss in particular causes the rival to finally start thinking that maybe, just maybe, he is the problem, not his Pokemon or anyone else. And that, my friends, is what we call growth. But that was the last obstacle barring us from the Elite Four. Who would have thought that after 4 previous attempts that we'd finally get this far? We actually talked a lot about what would happen if we ended up tripping up at the finish line. Like, would we go for attempt 6 and start all over again? Or would we say, hey, at least we got this far? That's something. And you know what we chose? We chose to wait and see because we couldn't make a decision. What would you do? Obviously we want to succeed, but it was getting harder and harder to schedule play sessions, and this project had already been going on for far longer than either of us thought it would. So for now, I'm just going to finish leveling up the party, teach any final TMs, and then it's showtime. So here's the squad all decked out and ready to go. I don't think it's too bad, honestly, but what do you think? If you'd like to make a prediction, now is your last chance. Let's do this. First up is Will, and he leads with a Spinda, and with Elm I use Slash to do about a third of her health. As expected of a Spinda, she uses Teeter Dance to confuse me. I stay in for another Slash to take her into the red, and she responds with a Dizzy Punch, but it only does 20 HP of damage. Will uses a full restore, but considering we don't know what else he may have, this is not a bad place for us to see it used. After hurting ourselves and taking a Sucker Punch, we snap out of confusion and go for another Slash. A second Sucker Punch brings us down to about half, but our next Slash crits and we get the KO. Will next sends out a Lantern, to which we swap into Lotus, who can take a discharge no problem before we one-shot with a Leaf Blade. Out comes a Nidoking, but we have a hard counter for that as well, so we take him down in a single Earthquake from Holly. Wailord comes out next, and I switch to Marigold for a Thunderbolt, but not before Wailord is able to raise her special defense with Amnesia. We still do great damage, but I'm thinking we could have got the one-shot if she didn't have the boost. The damage activates her Citrus Berry, but it isn't enough to escape being KO'd by the next Thunderbolt. Wheel's final Pokemon is a Clefable, which is a bit scary because of Metronome, as if this Randomizer wasn't random enough. I keep in Marigold and use Thunderbolt, but it's not quite enough and she puts us to sleep. I know that will use another full restore, so I use that turn to swap into Holly for an Earthquake, but that actually does less damage, leaving Clefable in the yellow. But that's okay because I outspeed and can use a Dragon Claw for the win. A fairly low-risk battle, and I'm okay with that. Having moved up from being a Kanto gym leader, Koga is our next opponent. Despite this being a randomizer, he still manages to have a Venomoth, so I bring out Kenya and take him out with Fly. Next up is a Walrein, which is bad news for a few members of my team, including Kenya, so Marigold comes out but gets confused right away from a Swagger. However, Walrein starts to take damage from the black sludge it's holding. Now, having anything other than a poison type hold a black sludge is objectively a bad idea, but this randomizer didn't change any of the opponent's held items, so instead of black sludge healing Koga's muck, it's slowly killing this Walrein. Brilliant stuff here. Hurting myself in confusion gives Walrein a chance to set up Hail, but I stay in one more turn to see if I can get in a Thunderbolt. And I do, and it crits. What a round. Poliwrath comes out next, and with Marigold still being confused and having taken some damage, I swap into Lotus, but he's immediately put to sleep. I try to see if he'll wake up on his own, but a Dynamic Punch actually lands and puts us at half health. Not good. I switch to Kenya, and Poliwrath tries to hit Dynamic Punch again, but misses, giving us the chance to use Fly, but it just barely doesn't KO him. His Citrus Berry puts him back into the yellow, and he hits his next Dynamic Punch, leaving Kenya at just 33 HP and confused. This is too risky for comfort, so I bring in Daisy, but she just gets put to sleep too. This is so very frustrating. I try to keep her in, but then Poliwrath starts using submissions, which brings him back into the red and me into the yellow. Koga uses a full restore, and I try an Earthquake from Holly, which does about half. I hope a second one can clinch it, but it just barely doesn't. But Holly is fast and can squeeze in a feint attack to finally take out this menace. Half of my team is at iffy health and or sleeping because of him. Koga's fourth Pokemon is a Masquerain with Intimidate. My attack is lowered, but I managed to take it out in 2 Dragon Claws, thinking whoever I need to think that Masquerain's Stun Spore missed. Outlast is a Blossom, and I try to take it out with Holly, but my attacks aren't really doing it, and then he gets paralyzed with Sunspore. Couldn't escape it forever, I suppose. I remain stubborn and try to continue on regardless, but I almost fatally paid for my greed when a Magical Leap crits, leaving Holly with only 8 HP. I am so glad he survived. Holly is too good to lose this early on. Despite being asleep and with not as much health left, I switch to Lotus because Magical Leap isn't going to be much of a threat. But after 2 turns, he still sleeps, so I have to switch again to Daisy to see if I have better luck. And I do. Daisy wakes up and ends the battle with an extra sensory. Between the Venomoth and the status afflictions, I feel this was just another normal Koga fight. I guess he decided he was too good to commit to being in a randomizer. Bruno, another familiar face from Gen 1, is the next Elite Four member. As usual, I lead with Elm, and that works out really well, as we're able to one-shot Rampardos with Surf. Beautifly is out next, and I hope for the one-shot Ice Fang, but it leaves him in the red, and then we're hit with a decently damaging Bug Buzz. Bruno, of course, uses full restore, but we just use 2 more Ice Fangs, and Beautifly goes down. Third is Golem, and like Rampardos, he goes down to a Surf. Magcargo is out next, meaning that's 3 out of 4 Pokemon that Elm was able to one-shot with Surf. I'm really glad I decided to lead with him. But Bruno mixes it up for his last Pokemon, a Sharpedo. I swap to Marigold, but a Crunch from Sharpedo puts me at half, which makes me real nervous, but I go for a Thunderbolt anyway because I've gotta be faster, right? And I am, and it takes him down. Marigold's comparatively lower defense stat has been making me nervous all along, and I'm really hoping that he can continue to pull through. Last of the Elite Four is Karen, and she leads with a Tangrowth. Not for the first time do I wish I had a Fire type, or at least a Fire type move on this team. A Fly from Kenya does about 2/3, but then she gets hit by a Stun Spore. I try for Fly again, but then realize that a 2-turn attack when paralyzed isn't a great idea. I pay for this blunder by taking a super effective Ancient Power, almost putting me in the red. This can't end well, so I bring in Daisy, who can tank Ancient Powers all day. An extra sensory is enough to finish Kenya's work, and Karen next sends out a Dewgong. Dewgong dives underwater, and because she outspeeds, I'm able to hit her with a Hypnosis as she emerges. But extra sensory doesn't do great damage on her, and she dives again after waking up a couple of turns later. Dive puts Daisy in the yellow, which is perfect for a critical hitting brine. Daisy faints. I probably should have looked more into Dewgong's movesets. How could Daisy, a Pokemon I've used for almost every gym, if not every, I don't really remember, this script is 16 pages long already, trip at the finish line like this? If Daisy had made it through the champion, we could have finally gotten them Psychic and Kanto and really be unstoppable. But, alas, this is where their journey ends. F's in chat to my first, and best, Bronzong. Marigold steps up to take vengeance and finishes off Dewgong with a Thunderbolt. Karen then sends in Omastar, but he too falls to the might of Marigold's Thunderbolt. But her next Pokemon is a Metagross, and that's a no from me, dog, so I switch to Holly. Metagross boosts its speed with agility and hits a Psychic for a little less than half, but then we let them have it with a super effective Earthquake. Karen's final Pokemon is a Ditto of all things. The only thing Ditto can do is transform, so I needed to transform into something easy to knock out. Which happens to be myself. It's one of those times where I'm happy Dragon is weak to Dragon. I almost take it out with a Dragon Claw before it can even transform, but once it does, it stands no chance against another Dragon Claw, securing my victory against the Elite Four. All that remains is the champion, but I'm still feeling the loss of Daisy. They should be here for this battle, but nothing I can do will bring them back, so I will simply say that I dedicate this fight to Daisy, and I hope that I don't disappoint them. Lance sends out a Luminion as his first Pokemon, and I barely have time to remember what Aquamarine actually does before I knock him out with a crit Leaf Blade from Lotus. But Magcargo is second, so it's back to Elm. A Surf would have normally been enough, but Magcargo uses Amnesia to give him the ability to just squeak by. Or I just low-rolled because even after a full restore, second Surf one-shots. But Lance's third Pokemon is Luxray, which is dangerous for Elm, but Child's Play for Holly, who gets the knockout with an Earthquake. Next up is Pinsir, and I opt to stay in, taking it down in 3 Dragon Claws. In perhaps an effort to mock me, Lance brings out a Dusknoir, as well as my memories with Dandelion. Feint Attack is super effective, but doesn't really do a lot of damage. Dusknoir then uses Curse to bring Holly into the yellow and itself into the red. But Lance is going to heal, so I use this chance to switch into Kenya. Dusknoir proceeds to miss every attack he uses against Kenya, due to Kenya either being in the air or just bad luck. But this is great news for us, so after a few turns of Fly, we take him out. Lance's ace and final Pokemon is a Ludicolo. Excellent. A Fly puts Ludicolo in the red, but then his Citrus Berry heals him out of potion range. Love when that happens. Giving a second Fly from Kenya the ability to knock him out, defeating Ludicolo, the Pokemon champion, and this Nuzlocke. After 4 failed attempts, we finally got what could be called the God Run. Not many deaths, plus a stacked team, has made this probably my favorite Nuzlocke I've done so far. Even after all the work it took to get here. It was a first for me in a lot of ways, but boy was it fun. Now let's get the big question out of the way. Kanto. I know way back at the start of this I mentioned the potential of battling Red, and that is something I'd still like to do. However, like I alluded to earlier, Cap and I have gotten to the point where we can no longer reliably have game sessions together. This is obviously unfortunate, as he was fun to do this with and was a great help in putting the seeds together, strategizing, and other aspects as well. But we've done some talking, and a possible solution to this is for Cap to graciously give his save file over to a successor who can take over and get us through Kanto. I'm personally excited about that idea, and I'd like to know if you'd be as well. If I do that, it will definitely not take as much time to put out as this video did. I'm really sorry about that, by the way. It's one of those things where the longer the gap got, the more daunting it got to sit down and finally make it. But I'm so happy I've finally gotten this out to all of you, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. This was all originally streamed on Twitch, so feel free to follow me there if that sounds neat to you, and also subscribe here for more stuff like this. Till next time, see ya!